this. Ta-da!
I'm actually going to turn the screen off because that's alarming. um, how are you, Lloyd?
I'm pretty well. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty well.
Pretty good. Good to know.
Do you say
That's
well?
how we always start these things. We just ask each other how we
Yeah.
are, even though we've already done that.
Do you say well or good? You say I'm well, but I am. Yeah, it's well, isn't it?
Sometimes it depends. Sometimes I'll just be a bit, I'll just be a bit spontaneous and say I'm well,
Yep.
and then leave it and not ask them back and be like really rude about it. Just be like, yeah, I'm good, or I'm well.
It happened a
End
lot
of.
in Germany where we went to the festival recently, and you would say
Yeah.
to people like, "Oh, how's it going?" And then they would start to answer you, and you would walk away because over here you just go, "How's it going?" Which is hello, not like an actual question of "How are you?" You know. Um, and they're like, "It's so rude." They ask you how you are, and then they don't want to listen.
That's a very good point, actually. Yeah, that is very true. They're very abrupt, but I like that. Be like,
Yes. Well, they're
they get
direct.
shit done. They don't mess around.
Yeah.
I promised some ideal bants to begin this fabled return of the Dyers cast. I have a question for you, actually. Um, what do you reckon of the Emperor being back in Star Wars?
What do I reckon? I don't like it.
I'm weirded out by it.
I think it's lazy. I think it's lame. You know, like new things. Give me new things. I've seen the old Star Wars movies. Like I know what they are. I've seen them a lot. Make a new guy. Make another Darth Maul, but cooler with more stuff.
Well, isn't that just the way that's the way that is? I think that's the bat. I don't know. I think it's good that they're saying that this is the end of a particular era. I think that there's a strength to that because that means they're just gonna pull on everything that people love about it that already exists to make this one good. And I don't know if that's
Yeah.
a good or a bad thing, really. I did actually. I've got to admit, I do like that trailer they released. If anyone in the universe missed it, the Star Wars trailer came out.
Yeah, I mean, I think like they're very good at trailers. The trailers are always
They're
good.
really
You
good
know?
at trailers. Yeah,
Like
that's true.
they're always good, but then like the films, they're good. They're fine, but they're not like. But I actually don't know like how. You know, like this is controversial as fuck, but I actually don't know how great Star Wars is anyway. You know, like in terms of like when
Yes.
you watch a Star Wars film, you're not like blown away by it. It's just you have a lot of nostalgia as to why they're good, and so I don't necessarily think that they're always exceptional films. You know.
I don't know. I find myself still enchanted by it, but only by certain things. I think this is what I've worked out in my brain. My relationship with Star Wars at the moment is essentially. I think everyone needs to decide with Star Wars whether we just keep it special and leave it alone, or you just start taking risks with it because no one seems to take risks with it. I think you're right. Like there's only it's been basically living off Empire Strikes Back for a long time.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, the
Um,
prequels are risky, but they're also not great. You know. But there's stuff in there that I like, but like, I don't know. Like, it's just very samey. And like now, it's the Emperor is the bad guy maybe again. And it's like, okay, well, what about Snoke? What was the point of him at all? You know,
That's
like
I find that really funny though. That I really hope that we never get the answer to who he was.
yeah,
Because there were so many videos before the Last Jedi came out that were saying, "Oh, who is this guy? Like he must be this or he must be that."
Yeah.
And then it was like, "No, he's no one."
he's just dead. Yeah,
And while that isn't maybe the best storytelling direction, it is really funny to watch people lose their shit.
I would just much prefer like if this story was not about the old Star Wars movies, you know, and it is just about the old Star. It's about Luke and Han and like the Emperor and Leia, and it's like okay, but we know that,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
that's true. Yeah,
it's like-
and they've been systematically killing them
yeah,
each.
which
each
is
time.
just, I mean, also lazy because it's guaranteed to get like a shock factor. It's like okay, well, is that great? Is that so? I don't know.
I liked Han Solo's death. I thought that was actually. I don't know. I figured like he needed to go anyway. So if he was going to go, it was a pretty I don't know, interesting way to go. It puts Star Wars back into like the legendary sort of myth status, but like a different myth. In this case, Oedipus, like him fucking murdering his dad. Like I think Kylo is the diamond in the rough of those stories. I think he's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, he's a good character.
He's well written too, yeah, for sure.
It just misses a lot of. It's just a bit. It's predictable, kind of, you know.
I'm still very excited for the next one, but we'll see.
I'll go see it, definitely. Like I love Star Wars.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
But I also like whinging about Star Wars, you know.
Exactly. We if we can't whinge about it, then what is it?
Yeah.
So welcome back to the Dice Cast for everyone.
Yes,
we're back.
We're back. We figured we'd do it again.
What are we going to talk about today, Lloyd?
Like a bunch of stuff. I'm going to talk about hierarchy in games. So when you have a party of people, do they have a leader, and do they not, or should they? And is it helpful, or is it not helpful? Is it good or bad? That kind of thing. And then we're going to talk about characters dying in the campaign related to hierarchy. Because we recently had a pretty big upset in one of our games. And then the other thing is setting Burnout. I've been doing a lot of work on Iscloft of late, and I really would love to do something very different. And I just wonder, like, is it just because I'm working on this? Definitely just because I'm working on this, or is it because it's something where I'm like, I've done this a lot, now I want to try something else, or is it something that can be fixed with a one shot, or should I do a campaign, or that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's start there then. I think, I mean, to be fair to you, man, like you've been playing, running, writing Iscloft for years, so it's not like, you know, it's not like it isn't merited or warranted. I think you'd be mad if you didn't get that, like, every now and again, because it's the same with anything, really. You want to indulge in world building or creating something, but then something else will come up as well. And it's the same for playing games. Sometimes you want to play a strategy game on your PC. Sometimes you want to play an RPG, you know, like, it's just...
Yeah, I think, like, part of it is that, like, the reason I play in so many games that are similar and run so many games that are similar is because I like those games, you know? Like, Game of Thrones and Iscloft are, like, very similar in terms of tone and lethality, and they tend to be, like, heavy agency games and stuff like that, and so that's, like, something that I enjoy a lot. But I have, like, recently had this urge to, like, make some mental fantasy, high fantasy setting, because I've been running a home game for some dudes, and it's been great. Like, it's very hack and slashy, but, like, it's really fun, and I've got, you know, mind flayers in there, and fucking Gith, and, like, all the big wigs, all the large monsters, and stuff like that, and I never get to use them ever in Iscloft or in Game of Thrones, where you're going to be fighting a guy with a nasal helm almost all the time, you know? Yeah, so but the thing is, like, I have this, like, urge now, but then I wonder, like, if I start a campaign of it, will I get bored of it quickly because I like the other thing, or, you know, is it safer to do, like, a one shot and see if I can figure it out that way?
I think that's really interesting, and it's quite coincidental, actually, Lloyd, because I too have recently started a home game, and it's using an old setting that my friends and I used to use way back when. We were just playing standard D&D, basically, but our own sort of world, essentially. It wasn't particularly, like, in depth or anything, but it was just there to serve a purpose, I suppose, is the best way to put it. But from years and years and years of play, it did become something that was really interesting and fun. But it was high magic, and it was absolutely nuts. It was super hack and slash, and I think that benefits weirdly for being an in-person style of play. I think, strangely, when you have a grid in front of you in person, I think magic becomes a bit easier to deal with and think about because you've got the ranges right in front of you and stuff.
Yeah.
Like mechanically speaking, there's a lot to be said of having that grid right in front of you. And I know that obviously can be done online as well, but not in the ways that we play anyway.
Yeah, not usually.
So I think that's an interesting thing. But I don't know. Like, I mean, if you want to run games that are high fantasy, I say all power to you, man, and go for it. I don't think there's anything wrong with giving it a try. You could always just start running it and see if you just want to do a few linked one shots.
Yeah, I might try that. And I gotta finish this thing first, but I think once it's done, I want to try and see if I can do something a bit more out there, maybe, and see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're going to come back to Iskloft in a bit because I'll be using a Iskloft character the class. Sorry, to create a Game of Thrones character because my character in the Game of Thrones game Old Ways met his end. It actually amazed me how organically and how fitting it felt knowing that my character had essentially sealed his fate in a trap of honor.
Yes.
Of his own making.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've ever been more reassured about a character death than in that game. Is that weird?
It did feel very correct, I think.
Yeah.
Sort of like a weird sort of Game of Thrones justice, I think, you know?
Yes. What comes around goes around is sort of the loose watchwords of playing in a Game of Thrones game. And as we're talking about cultural constraints, I'm guessing we're going to be focusing on Westeros, but essentially is the hard lesson learned when you're operating in a frame of societal rules or whatever, like a structure. If you don't obey that structure or those rules, then you kind of lose the protection of that society, and that makes you vulnerable, and that is where the problems start happening. And I think that's interesting because... Sorry, go ahead.
You got trapped where it got trapped in like a... There were so many things like weighing on it. So many... There was no other really option. Or there were other options, but like they would have been very difficult or hard to swallow, I think, you know?
They would have been very selfish as well. I mean, his turning point really was... and for those that don't know, very, very quickly, Warwick had decided that he was going to be involved in a trial by battle, 7 of his men against 7 of someone else's, because they had a disagreement about a cultural... well, you know, I don't even know how to describe it, to be honest, like a cultural flaw, shall we say. And because of that, Warwick found himself putting his word out there that he and his men will risk their life over this matter. Meaning that not only was he putting his life on the line, he was putting the lives of basically everyone of his house, fledgling house really, on the line, risking the future of their entire family. And it was throughout the course of the next session, Warwick speaking to a number of his family members, he changed his mind and decided that what he was doing, while he thought he was in the right, he had no reason or right really to command people to come with him on that gamble. Meaning he then fought this guy alone who he knew was going to be an incredible warrior, a veteran from A Dance of Dragons, for those of you who know Ice and Fire mythology and stuff. So this hardened warrior, and he lost. But all the same, it felt like the end of a chapter. It felt like an end of a season of Game of Thrones, weirdly. Yeah,
part of the arc, I think, was like this character coming home to the North, having not lived there for a while. And maybe not fully like reintegrating.
That's exactly it.
You know, and then coming up against this thing. So if you haven't watched it, actually, I should say, Rob played Warwick, who was the Lord of House Slate, and there was a wedding, and there was going to be a bedding, which is like a tradition in Westeros. and Warwick said that there wouldn't be a wedding, and so some of the lords were angry about that, and there was a discussion, and it led to this duel. Anyway, and there had been a discussion as well between Warwick and this Lord Ryder, who's the guy he ends up fighting, about yielding in the fight, about like whether that was a possibility or should it be allowed or whatever. And it was very interesting sort of conversation where he was trying to make you say, yeah, I want the option to yield.
Yeah, and I was trying to make him say I want the option to yield as well, and he didn't.
And he didn't, yeah. And so because of that, when it came to the point where Warwick was defeated but not dead, there was like a moment where one of the other characters sort of called out and said, "Spare him, save him." And this guy was like, "Well, we had this conversation about yielding, and should that be allowed?" And he was like strongly against it.
Yeah.
And so he, as far as he was concerned, like Warwick would have killed him in the reverse. And
so absolutely would have. Yeah, absolutely would have. That would have been no hesitation on my part to have killed that guy.
And so then for him, like it felt particularly as a GM difficult because it wasn't just like you've been hit with a fireball and you're dead. It was like you're unconscious and all these people are watching, and then he makes the decision to execute you, which is like way more deliberate. And often when characters die, it's because there's a big combat and all this stuff is happening around them and whatever. This was like a situation that didn't have to happen and could have been stopped, but because of like societal reasons, like no one got involved, and like it could have been stopped by him saying like, actually no, I will spare his life, but it didn't make sense that he would do that. And so then it was like, really, it felt like, I am going to kill you now, Rob. Like much more.
I know, man, but like I honestly I felt that from you completely, but I think and it's a testament to how well we all sort of know and understand that world, really, and that's not to like blow our own trumpets or anything. It's just that we've played a lot of Game of Thrones in the past or whatever, or similar kind of games. Mm-hmm. So it was everyone sort of knew that there was sort of that boundary within society where people would understand that someone's word is law, and to try and break that in public, when you're of a certain status and when you have certain responsibility and people that you rule, etc., there are certain things that you have to abide by, even if it means that you have to watch a family member be killed. That's just the world and how it operates. We've seen it in the TV show, we've seen it in the books, like it's just part of that world, and it's what makes that world as interesting as it is. To not have those rules whilst playing Game of Thrones would be to like playing chess without any rules. There would be no significance to it otherwise. You have to work within the established rules to play the Game of Thrones, as it were, which is an interesting part of the game.
So then Warwick died. Warwick was the Lord of House Slate, and it's sort of like as a game, sort of empire building. So the characters have a ton of agency and lots of options and things like that. And so now they are leaderless, so to speak, like because he's dead. There was a sudden sort of vacuum in terms of power, like because we had that hierarchy set up when we started. And something like we often do when we play games or when I play games or run games, is that I like the party to have like a system of who's in charge, so that decisions can be made. There's a place where the book stops, sort of, so you don't end up with endless sort of decisions here and there, like, oh, well, I want to do this thing, oh, well, I want to do this thing, and I want to do this thing. Like when you have the hierarchy in place, you have a person who can say, actually, this is what we're doing,
yeah, absolutely.
So it's very useful for that.
Well, it just makes more sense because the real world is filled with that. Like if you have a job, you have a boss, or maybe you're self-employed, but even then you're still doing something for to earn survival in a different way. It's just the way that human beings act, and it's fair enough if you do play games that are by committee, and those home games that I was talking about are very much
Yeah.
just a group of people out there on the road, like trying to make an organization to earn money to level up or whatever, like just fun stuff like that. But when you're talking about sort of storytelling and things like that, then to have power dynamics is crucial in a lot of ways. And if you want to sort of try and explore that in a sort of like free-form sandbox, you've just got to have those roles there and ready to go for you to play around with.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier, I think, to have the kind of games that we play. It's easier to have a person who's in charge, because we often play games where it's like presented with, here is the setting, here is where you are, here is what you have, now succeed, you know? And so there's not so much input from the GM in terms of like, you're in this place and this is happening. It's more like, what do you want to do all the time? And so that works better when you have someone who's in charge who can make those decisions, and like someone who's like a figurehead for the party, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely.
It tends to work really well in that way. I guess, like, I mean, to me, it seems even a normal adventuring party could do with someone who's in charge. But it does run into issues with that. I think, like, one of the big things that I notice is that when someone is in charge, someone is the leader of the party, that other players start to be more quiet and like contribute less, because there's someone who's in charge. Not always, because there's someone in charge. Other players can often feel like, well, you know, this person's going to make the decision anyway, so I can kind of just like sit back and relax, or like I don't need to do as much stuff.
Yep.
And I don't really know what the answer to that is beyond like the GM hassling them into doing things, you know.
Well, I think the reason why it kind of works, I hate saying the reason why it works when we do it, but we have our own established way of doing it because we know how we all like to play games and stuff, so that's a given. But I think the reason why it works in our ways is because there is a hierarchy, but that hierarchy not only gives you like an order that you're in terms of society, but it also allocates you a certain role. And that role then allows you to know what your character's purpose is in that game. For instance, Jeremy Snow is of a lower down in the hierarchy than, say, someone like Wylard or someone up there, you know. And because of that, his missions and his skills and his focuses are on what his purpose is. And because of that, it not only gives the game diversity, it gives him something specific to do that is specific to him. You know, he is the only one that's going out and like in charge of the ranging and like, you know what I mean? Like he has been given his role by society. So I think the benefits of people having their individual roles in society is almost as integral in those games as your class, like what you can do mechanically.
Almost more so, I would say.
Yeah,
like in an empire building game, or like a game that has lots of agency, like your social status is probably more important than your mechanical class, because you're going to be using your connections and your sort of like if you're a lord, it doesn't matter if you're like a lord in Westeros. It doesn't matter if you're a fighter or a rogue or a whatever class you are. It doesn't matter, because your job is not to be going around killing people in combat. It's to run the house, you know. And so you can do that no matter what class you are. It doesn't really matter so much. And also the kind of games that we play, because we play games that have lots of agency and are kind of about building empires, very quickly it becomes the case that you're not going to be in the front line of combat very often, because that's how you lose the game. That's the fail state of the game, is if you go in a big fight and then you all die, or two of you die, or the Lord dies, you know, that can be the end of a game.
Absolutely.
And so your mechanical class really isn't as important as your social class, so to speak, you know. So in Iscloft, if you're the Jarl, you have it doesn't matter what class you are, because your job is to run the place. And if you're the Huskarl, then your job is to do the military stuff. And your job is if you're the Seder, then your job is to do all the spooky shit and prevent curses and heal people and that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. And it also gives you sort of like a mode and a method for you to build on how your character should behave. Like with Iscloft and the Outlaw, for instance, you now know that you literally have your rank in society branded onto your forehead or wherever, you know, like, so, you know, you get that as well.
It's like one of the really, like, every class in Iscloft has as part of the character description, has a social status section to explain like where this, because that's so important in Iscaloft, is like, you know, a berserker is a holy person, like a sacred person, and so it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Like if you have a blessing from Odin that makes you invincible, then you're important. It doesn't matter where you are, you know. And if you're an outlaw and you have this thing on your face, like this brand that says I am a criminal, everywhere you go people will hate you and dislike you. It doesn't matter, you know. And so like
Absolutely.
it's almost more important than, oh, I can do sneak attack, you know. It doesn't really matter so much in the grand scheme of things. It's the fact that like when you go to a village, they will be like, you are not welcome here, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's actually something worth considering when you're thinking, I think, particularly in these sort of like empire building-y agency games, more so than your class.
Yeah, there's something else as well that I'd like to mention about that, because with that hierarchy and with the fact that you have this social structure where those decisions matter and those decisions hold weight and often risk as well. I'm still of the mind that the risks that Warwick took was still mainly for the best interest of the house, but obviously, as we all know, that went awry towards the end. But overall, his decision making was trying to, you know, keep Blackmere and House Slate on the upward incline. But I felt as a player, and this is something that I'm really glad that I've experienced, because it gave me a lot of reassurance about this style of play. Because you would think that if you are a person who is playing the Jarl or the Lord or whatever, you would have a certain weight of responsibility put onto you, because at the heart of it, it's you're the one that's making the decisions that will change the direction of the game. It is up to you, if you're playing a king, to decide whether your kingdom goes to war, for example.
Yeah.
Lord, who you, raise your banners to, you know, that kind of thing. It's incredibly important, especially in these kind of cultural states that we've been talking about. But I felt very reassured because, and I don't know if it's because as the character he would do that, or because I felt I needed to. I think it was a mixture of both, to be honest. I would like to get the opinion of other people. So it wasn't just me saying, we're going to do this and we're sticking by this no matter what.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely something you could do within the constraints of that society.
Yes.
But I felt okay about it because I could take that stance. I could listen to the counsel of the other characters and the other players.
Yeah.
And that has, and I hope will continue to be, probably one of my favorite things of that game is that we would have these meetings where something crazy would happen, and then we'd all go into a room, the door would shut, and we go, what the fuck are we going to do? And we then have these amazing conversations where we're like desperately trying to work out what should happen.
Yeah.
And I thought it was beautiful in that particular session because that particular meeting came to an end in very much a defeat.
Yeah.
It was like, we're fucked.
Yep.
Someone's going to have to pay the price. And that was that, you know?
Yeah.
So...
Yep. I think, like, somebody just said in the chat about, in the AC Inc., I think that's Acquisitions Inc., a person can be made the decisionist, where you get a coin that counts as an extra vote, which is cool. Like, I think the council thing, for me, when I have played Lords previously, is, like, I'll know what my decision is, and then I'll talk to the other players and ask them what they think, the other characters, what they think, and then try and steer them in the way that I want to go. Or, you know, if it's all against what I was thinking, then I have to rethink what I'm doing. And so it's great, but like mechanically, or not mechanically, but like in game, the book still stops with you and you get to make the decision even if they don't like it, you know? And
that's true. That's true.
That can be like one of the hardest things about being the leader, is that sometimes what you think is best, other people don't think is best. And you have to be able to go, well, we're doing it anyway, you know, because all of the responsibility falls on you as the leader. And so you can end up with a situation where like this, where you're like, I'm going to fight this man. And then everyone's like, don't fight this man. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to anyway. And then you're dead. You know?
That's absolutely true.
There was in the other Game of Thrones game Nico ran years ago, like a year ago.
The fabled saga
Yeah,
of
Dragon's Horde.
Game of the yes.
I played the Lord in that Magor, and he was like an older man, and he was notorious for taking no shit. And there was a point where Dan Schmel's character like refused to obey an order, or did something against his orders or something, and then he gave him another order, like a deliberately difficult one, like impale that man. And he wouldn't do it, and so like that's twice that he had refused his orders, and so Magor was like, well, I have no use for you. If you can't do what I tell you, I have no use for you. And so Magor, the character, would have removed that person from his entourage, no question, but also Dan is playing in the game with me, and Dan Schmel's a lovely guy, and I don't want to kick him out of the game. And so then there was quite a long discussion, like firstly in character and then out of character. We had to step back and be like, okay, we want Dan to play in the game, so we have to figure out a way for this to make sense so that he doesn't have to leave because my character doesn't want him there. So there is a sort of like also responsibility, like in a meta level, to the game itself, where you have to be like, okay, well, I still have to think about the game as a whole and the players and stuff like that, beyond the fact that in fiction my character can do whatever they want. In reality, it's still a cooperative sort of team game.
Yeah, absolutely, and like cards on the table, that's something I definitely went through, because there was a time between the two sessions. The one session ended on the challenge being issued and it being accepted, and then there was a long gap where we could all stew on the fact how royally fucked we were because of a decision I made. And I'll be honest with you, like I did feel, and everyone was really understanding about it, but I did want to put out there, I was like, just so you guys know, like I'm not deliberately trying to like sort of plow our campaign into the dust here with this decision. I promise you, that's not why I did it. It's I think with Game of Thrones and Iscloft and things like that, there's characters that you can play that operate in the system who are cold or brutal, or maybe they're not evil necessarily, but they do what they have to do to get shit done,
Yeah.
And then there are characters that falter because of ties that hold them emotionally, or with other oaths or honors that they have to like stick by. There's the it's
one of my favorite things is like this game, Old Ways, and in Saga we had leaders who maybe didn't fit the world in a way that they should have. So like Phelan was like Phelan was too good for Iscloft, like too good a person to be the Jarl in Iscloft. And I think Wyrick had sort of romantic notions about what life could be like, and couldn't reconcile that with how life actually is.
Exactly true. Exactly true.
And I think that's really like poetic and lovely in a way, like, and it really serves to hammer home like how shitty those worlds are, because like you want it to succeed. You look at it and you go, oh well, this is like a good person, and wouldn't it be nice if, and then like splat, they're dead, the world carries on, and like sends a really strong message of like, you can dream if you want, but this is the world, and it pushes back and doesn't forgive.
That's the thing is, that's my favorite thing about being in these games. That's something that I always try and aim for either an Iscloft game or a Game of Thrones game. With Iscloft, with Ragnar, I love the idea that he was the lowest of the low. Literally anyone could take a shit on him, and he still has to keep going.
Yeah.
There's like he has a disadvantage, like in the society he's been put in. And I like the idea of that being the same with Wyrick as well. But we have a question about foreshadowing that's been posted.
Let's look at
that. So let's have a look at that question now.
So Connor,
but it kind of links.
Says, one of my favorite things are foreshadowing in a campaign, but I find that hard to implement in open-ended games or games where each session is improvised as it happens. How do you foreshadow future events if they're not planned? Legitimately, the hardest thing about running a campaign, I think, in the way that I run campaigns, is that you can't really have a plot.
No.
So like in Old Ways, like I've done some foreshadowing about winter is coming, and that means Ironborn usually come, and like that could be bad. But you can't really, because it's so open-ended and so improvised, like you can't really foreshadow, I don't think, in those kind of games,
Which is why I think it's No, you absolutely can't. You can overshadow with the grand themes of the existing world, like you mentioned, with Song and Ice and Fire. Absolutely, is winter is coming, and we all know it is. It's the same in Lord of the Rings. Like if you're playing like before Sauron, like that eventually he's coming back. You can do foreshadowing because the larger world will one day be affected by these key things that are in it. I think a lot of foreshadowing can be encouraged from your players, though. I think if you so into the fact that your cat, and this is what I was going to mention about Wyrick, the thing that I enjoyed an awful lot about Wyrick was that his arc and his motivations all they essentially went back on love for his wife, and for a tragedy before the weirwood. That's all it was. Love for his wife, and the weirwood being the symbol of that. It's a very, very loose symbol, but it's enough for me to tie the character to. So when it came wonderfully to the point where he is then once again standing before a weirwood tree, first of all getting married to someone he doesn't want to get married to, really, and then dying in front of a weirwood, that makes foreshadowing very easy. I mean, it's a convenience. That's all it really is.
That's kind of I think that's the way to do it in games that are so loose. Is you just need to find things that are symbols, and you can use those quite well. Because I think the idea of like you can plant seeds for lots of things and then sort of retroactively foreshadow when something happens,
Yes.
When an opportunity presents itself, you can be like, I planned this all along, like,
planned it all along, exactly.
That's really like a difficult skill, I think, and like it requires a really good ability to improv, because you need to be, because running a game improvisationally is very difficult anyway. You have to like do the mechanics, mind everybody's like spotlight time, and you have to like also improvise the dialogue of like 30 NPCs or whatever. So
and do maths and do all sorts. So
it's
all kinds of things.
A lot to work out. So I guess what you can do like is keep track of like the kind of things that you've suggested could happen or might happen or whatever, and then just like have them sort of ready-ish to go. And then when something comes up that sort of rhymes or like rings true with one of those things, then you can weave that back in a little bit and sort of mention like, just like before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should jump into some more questions, Lloyd.
Yes.
So that was Connor Davis's first one. He's posted a second saying, do you enjoy games where the characters have vast political power? Well, yes. or games where they're the underdogs and lackeys? Do they call the shots and the forces that be bow to them? Or do they hop from task to task, puppeteered by someone behind the scenes? Well, I think that's fairly self-explanatory for us. For me in particular, I don't want to speak for you, Lloyd, but I think we enjoy both. I think it's good to be on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, I generally don't love being told to go here and do a thing.
No, that's fair.
But I do like playing like people at the top, like jarls and lords and things. But I also like playing shitlords, goblins, whatever, who are like just trying to manage. And I think both of those are really fun. And I think like that lower level is like what my Star Wars game is like, and I often think that's like the best kind of Star Wars game is, your ship barely works, like everything's falling apart, you have no fucking money, and so you have to do what you can to get by, and I like that a lot.
That's the thing, and the reason why you're then having to go from task to task is for the greater motive of survival and things like that. I think that's you're not doing it just because exactly. You like shit. I need to do this because if I don't have enough money, I'm not going to be able to feed myself or
I guess the important distinction there for me is like you are deciding what you're doing, as opposed to you're working for a patron and he's like, go here and do this thing. Now go here and do this thing. Now get me this thing. And like that's not so interesting to me. But I do like when you have some choice in the matter of what you're doing, but you still have to work for powerful people or whatever,
Yeah, once again, you're just operating within the constraints of the world that you find yourself in, and obviously, depending on what part of the societal structure you find yourself on, depends on how you act, and I guess then dictates what kind of game you're playing, which is kind of cool.
Okay, this isn't really a question from Todor, I don't think.
No, but you can you can read if you want.
Any social gathering has formal and informal leaders. It just comes natural to us, doesn't it? And tabletop RPGs are social gatherings. It's true, I think.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's a good point.
I definitely have a tendency to like want to make decisions and keep things moving, and so I often end up That's why I started to often play the leader, is because I would be like, what are we doing? Okay, we're doing this,
Yeah.
you know? But I'm just like that in many aspects of life. I'm like, what's the plan here? Let's just do the thing.
Yeah, and for me, it's I get a little bit of that. But my favorite thing is just having conversations with people. I think
Yeah.
that's my favorite thing. And if it's about topics that I know about, if it's Star Wars, I get to like monologue about the Force or whatever. Or if it's that's like my favorite thing to do. But yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Okay, and then we have Kai's corner.
Kai's Corner, thank God. It's half. We were discussing before that this is essentially half the content of this show. So thank you, Kai's. Let's break these down then. So I'll read the first bit. A GM will always have a favorite player. Ooh, this is controversial. One whose vision of the imaginary world is closest or most attractive to the GM's tastes. Is this a problem? I don't personally feel like I have a favorite player. I don't know.
I think that you can, like, it's definitely possible that some people get the setting better than others,
Absolutely.
you know, but I don't necessarily know if that makes them the best player.
Yeah, I mean, there's it. It's in depth because then you've got to think, well, what makes the best kind of player? Then that's like a whole debate in itself,
Confusing.
isn't it?
Yep.
It is confusing.
So I don't know. I don't know that it's a problem. Like, Nico gets Iskloft very well, but like so does Jeff, and so does Taylor, and so do you, and so do many others. So like in Quo, and so I don't know, or in checks, like I don't necessarily think that it's. And the people get different things from a setting. So like sometimes the things that like Nico pulls from a campaign are very different to the things that like Taylor pulls from a campaign, or that you pull from a campaign. Like,
Yeah.
and they're all correct, you know, and all different. So I don't necessarily. Yeah, it's kind of a hard question to answer.
Yeah, particularly in the kinds of games that we play in, because everyone has their own, like you say, everyone has their own thing that they bring to the game, and their own thing that they take from the game as well. With Game of Thrones, another favorite thing in the vein of me saying, "Oh, I enjoyed just having in-character conversations." That the great thing about Game of Thrones is that whenever a character is talking to anyone in length, they're invariably telling them a story about something that's happened to them in the past or something they've heard about the setting. Caius in particular was very good for that he's good for it in every game, to be fair, but the one that I always think of with Caius is way back in Against the Shadow with Beregond, and all of that juicy Middle Earth lore that he would just
Treasure and stuff, yeah.
lyric us with, you know, and it's just a wonder. So
yeah, and he does it in Westeros as well, you know, occasionally.
Yeah, of course he does. Yeah, of course he does. Yeah,
here's the genealogy of your family. It's like, great, you know.
Yes.
Like adds, and again, that's like a thing that like, you know, Caius adds to a game that like other people don't. But everyone, like, the reason that you have like 5 players is because together, like 5 players pick the good bits and focus on different bits of a setting and stuff. So I think it makes for like, I have favorite groups to play with, you know.
Yeah.
That's
that goes back to the old Robert Baratheon saying, which is better, 5 or 1?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like the 5 makes the 1. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
But that's an interesting point. Caius Corner has got lots of different points though. So,
yes. If one player has a slightly different picture of the shared world in their heads, is this one simply wrong, and the player should bend to the GM's vision of the world, or should this individual try to influence and change the GM's vision of the world? Tough, heavy.
I need to go over that again. If one player has a slightly different picture of the shared world in their heads, is this simply wrong, and the player should bend to the GM's vision of the world, or should this individual try and influence and change the GM's vision of the world? Wow. Well, that's tricky, isn't it, with Westeros and established settings, isn't it? Because everyone, generally speaking, has like the same opinion of what's right and wrong in a world.
Yeah, I guess it's in the same, like in a similar way, like everyone takes different things from settings as well. So like, I might read Westeros and think this is what this means, or this is how this should look, and someone else might not see it that way. Because to me, like the whole night thing is very cynical, you know. Night in Westeros, for example, is very cynical, and like there are very few good knights, as far as I would see it. But that's not
Yes.
necessarily a correct reading. Like, it's also possible to say, well, what about this one or this one? Like, you know, like, both those could be correct, just as like a very simple example. I think, like, if you have strong opinions on a setting and they are different to the GM, I guess unless they straight up contradict the GM's vision, like, you should try and bring them in and see, like, that's how I think Iskof was made, is like people brought their own ideas and stuff over a long time and many games, and it makes the world richer. But then, like, if you have a vision that like entirely contradicts the GM's vision of their world, then maybe ask some questions.
But then it's it becomes more of a contradicting the GM, and it's like if I all of a sudden we were playing a Star Wars game, and then I say I use something that doesn't exist in Star Wars, like I say I use a force, and I just make a force power up on the spot or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are some things that you can't really argue with if you're playing like a Star Wars game but yeah, it's tricky. I think you're absolutely right. I think with different people coming into playing a game, it brings a lot, but it also people take different things from it. But I don't know. I wish I could answer that better.
Yep. Difficult questions from Caius.
It is difficult questions from Caius Corner too, and he continues asking, should a campaign finish with a TPK? If not, what is a campaign about? If the characters are not the focus of a campaign, what is? Different players will tire of a setting at different rates. Have you ever continued playing a campaign because someone else is still enjoying it? Have you ever lost interest, persevered, and regained it later? I think...
It depends.
Okay, yeah. It took a while for us to say it, but we've got there. It depends. The Fabled House words. It absolutely does depend.
So
I think
specifically,
yeah, you go.
with the Game of Thrones campaign that we're playing, that's not about characters. It's about a house. And so we could play that game 100 years in the future or 300 years in the past, and it would still be the campaign in some ways, you know?
Yeah.
And so if all of those characters die or of old age and their children are now the players, it's still the same game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that can be the case for empire building games in a way that it can't be for heroic games. Because often when you play a game that's more typical D&D, like the game is about the characters and their journey and their like adventures, as opposed to about a place or a house or a clan or something like that, you know.
And there are, I mean, the TPK, absolutely. The first thing that springs to mind is all of your characters obviously being killed in a combat, but there are other kinds of TPKs. I think there are societal TPKs. This is what immediately jumped to mind. Was not only was the duel that just happened, it could have been a potential TPK in terms of a combat, but it could have, you know, ended the game that way because all of the characters die. But I think it doesn't necessarily mean a game doesn't necessarily end just because all of the characters die. It can be like Saga, for instance. I would say that Saga would be a perfect example of a societal TPK where we were beaten by someone else. We didn't die, but we were beaten. We had to retreat, and we lost our lands because of it. So that, in a sense, is a kind of like a TPK, even if everyone survives. You know?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. I guess it's like a fail state for the game.
Yeah, like you have failed, so you didn't take over the world in this many turns. You know?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we play a game called Horde Lands where we're all siblings, and I feel like in that game, if one of the siblings died, the game would be done because I can't see. I can't see a way that game could continue without all of the. It would just be so heartbreaking for the other characters. Like I don't see it happening. But in old ways, I could see all of those characters dying and the game still existing. You know, in some sense or another. You know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's built into Game of Thrones, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've seen what happens when there's only a sole surviving member of a house.
Yeah.
That house just happens to be Targaryen, and then she
Yeah.
comes back with like that. That is written into the world that things like that can happen.
Yeah.
And I think the story goes on and on. Yeah.
Yep. I think the point about like tiring of a setting at different rates is interesting as well. Like, I think some games, like sometimes I'm like, but it's often because I'm like tired or I have to do something else, and then the game is coming and I'm not so. It's mostly when I'm running that I get a bit like, you know. But then I play and I'm into it again, and so I think like, you just have to like make yourself be there, and once you're there, like it will be good again, you know.
It will be, yeah. I agree, and I think it's like I put it down to, like I mentioned before, with today I don't want to play a real time strategy. I want to play an RPG or something. It's just down to personal taste, and sometimes like you need to freshen things up by enjoying different things. I think that extends from beyond just tabletop role playing games. But yeah, I mean, is there anything in particular that that tempts you to try something new other than just saying, "Oh, that's a good idea. I could do this, but I shouldn't." What's the tipping point?
I don't know.
It's hard, isn't it? Sorry, I realised that was a really hard question.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I think like it's helpful to have the campaign or like a campaign outline in your head before you start. Like, what's the game about? When does it end, if ever? You know, what's the victory state and what is the fail state? Like, if we're playing the Isfaf game we're playing tonight, like my character is the Jarl, and I think if he dies, that game loses a lot of its impetus, because he's sort of like a very heroic figure, and he's done a lot of like gathering people to him. I don't think it would necessarily end, but I could see that it could end if he died. Trying new things, I don't really know. I tend to think like if you signed up to the game and you want to play that game, then you have to play that game until it's done, or you take a point and you say, listen, like, I appreciate that this game is good, but I'm really starting to like lose interest. It's not anything that you have done. It's my own sort of burnout feelings. Can we try something new or try something else or something like that maybe?
Yeah, I think I honestly can't think of a time where I've ever lost interest in a game like that. I think you're right. Sometimes when you could be in a game or whatever, and then you're thinking, "Oh, I'm not really in the mood to play a role playing game tonight." But I think you're right. As soon as you sit down and jump back in, it's great again.
Yeah.
Because we love playing these games. We wouldn't be doing it if we didn't love it.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Okay.
Oh, and he said, so just to answer, have you, no, we did answer that. Sorry, I thought there was another bit to the question. I do apologise. Do we have any more?
Carol just says that she was interested to hear what we had to say about setting burnout.
Okay.
Or system burnout and that kind of thing. We talked about that though. Nico asked when we're playing Bloody Old Ways next.
Well, hopefully soon.
Yeah. We have one scheduled, I think.
And speaking of then, I mean, if we don't have any other questions, my last thing that I thought I could add to the conversation, because Wyrick died, I've got to make a new character.
Yes.
And it's an idea that I've been throwing around for a while. I kind of knew that I wanted to shift to the other side of the spectrum in terms of society and Game of Thrones, so I'm going to be lower in the pecking order, a bit of a, well, I think he is going to be a hedge knight, Lloyd, and I was going to run some ideas past you so we can sort of kind of show how we come up with ideas for a Song of Ice and Fire game, if anyone is interested in how we discuss it. So mechanically, I'm going to be an outlaw. For those of you interested, check out the Iskloft. Is it like I can't remember what you're calling it now. Is it like a compendium?
Yeah.
Does it have a name?
Uh,
A Grimarillion?
yes, that. That
That
sounds
one.
exciting.
Yeah, we'll check out Iskloft anyway to find the Outlaw. It's a really cool class. I'm gonna say he's from White Harbor, which for those of you that don't know, White Harbor is the North's apparently is the North's primary trade port. So I thought it'd be quite cool to be a city person, but from the North. I think that's quite an interesting concept. I think he might be a hedge knight. Now, the Mandaleys rule over White Harbor. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
I didn't know it. I know in modern Ice and Fire,
Yeah,
you know,
I think they've been there for a long time. Yeah.
have they? Okay, well that's all right. I don't think I will be. Maybe I was vouched for someone because to be a hedge knight, correct me if I'm wrong, Lloyd. You still obviously have to be knighted, don't you?
Yeah, it's often the case that hedge knights are knighted on the road.
Yeah.
So like, or like after a battle or something like that. Or for some special deed, like a lord or another knight might just go, okay, I knight you, this guy of this road that we're on,
Yeah.
and so it's very different to like legally it's the same as like an anointed knight, but there is some differences in terms of like you didn't spend a vigil in a sept probably, for a full night kneeling in armor, like those kind of things.
Yeah.
But big thing is you're not sworn to a house, and so you're landless and houseless, clanless. You're like a Ronin or something.
Yeah, and I think that's quite interesting because they have to basically wander around and make their name, really, don't they? They need to sort of put their sword to something that will pay them to do so because they just have to sell their services essentially, right? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, mostly they'll go from like house to house and say, "Hello, any work?" and then
Yeah, basically, yeah.
offer to help with whatever it is for whatever amount of time, usually a season or something like that. But I think the dream for a hedge knight is to get made a normal knight, so that you don't have to wander anymore. Well, some of them I think probably enjoy it, the fact that they're sort of more free to wander around, and often some of the best bandits are hedge knights because they have nightly training, and less moral quandaries, maybe.
Well, that's what, and that's the interesting thing because that's where like a lot of distrust comes from for hedge knights because they're a bandit knights and things like that. From the very, from what I remember, there are knights that turn from one path and start robbing people essentially. What do you think about there being some link with White Harbor? Is that a good thing to choose for?
I think like it would make sense if you were raised there or born there or something because it's I think like city sized for the north, like quite big, and so you might have a bit more sort of like this is my English or mate, like that sort of shit going on,
Yeah. That was really good. Well done.
It's all elbows apparently.
We're just like that. We're like that all the time.
Oi,
Oi, oi, mate.
but you know what I mean? It might a bit less like stoic northernism and a bit more like cheeky cityness, which I think makes sense for someone who's a rogue, a knave,
Yes. A knave of the I've actually just looked up White Harbor, and it's the largest city in the north apparently, but the smallest among the 5 major cities of Westeros.
Yeah.
So it's big, big enough for it to be a sprawling mass, but not as big as some of the others.
What are the other ones?
Lannisport,
King's Landing, Old Town, and one more.
Did you say King's Landing?
Yeah. Lannisport City, Old Town. I don't know. There must be another one somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I'll take its word for it. I'm sure there are. But that's quite cool because then at least I'll have some kind of connection to White Harbor. I'm not necessarily saying a connection with the Mandaleys, but maybe someone who knows the Mandaleys or because it's an interesting it's on the opposite side of the north though, isn't it? So it's quite far away.
Yep. It's on the Sunset Sea, Shivering Sea. I don't know which one it is. The one on the east of Westeros.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
It's like the only port, the big port in the north. So like all of the stuff that goes to Westeros or from Westeros or any of the houses north, go and they're selling it usually goes through White Harbor, and that's why they're so wealthy.
And that's not too far away to have my well, not connections necessarily, but my.
No, I think that's fine. I think like he could have been a, what do you call it, like a caravan guard, real classic D&D job. Like if people are going by land, or you might have been like a marine going with trading ships and stuff to protect them and that kind of thing. Pirate is entirely possible as well, because I'm sure there is some of that. And that side, there's no Ironborn because it's too far for them to go, and so there's lots of pirates way down south where the stepstones are and stuff. But
there's quite a big eel trade over there, so I wonder if he was in charge of like something shit like the transporting of eels or something. In fact, oh man, the Eel Knight, that would be quite cool.
Knight, yes. Yep.
Oh, a slippery knight. I quite like that actually.
Gross and slithery. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I quite like that. Yeah, interesting. Well, okay. Well, that's some things to work on anyway. I'd be quite happy to. Obviously, got to come up with a name. That's the tricky thing.
Yep. Cool. I mean, that works for me. I think that makes sense. And then you could have sort of heard of recent like eruptions over in that part of the other part of the north, like some house is growing, and you think, oh yeah, they'll hire me. Like they're gonna need boys,
Yeah. And I mean, he's used to being by the sea, just on the other side, yeah. So he's probably going to have that kind of sensibility to him.
Yep, could be a good sailor, even.
Perhaps. Well, there we go.
Yeah. There was one more question that we skipped.
Oh, we got questions. Yeah, cool.
What do you do when a player can't make availability for an existing campaign but joins a new campaign?
I don't know.
I guess talk to them directly.
Yeah, I think be absolutely direct about it if that's.
I would say just like message them and ask them what the story is. Like there could be many reasons for that. In terms of scheduling, like it's possible that this day doesn't work, but this one does, or this is less frequent, or whatever it is. I think it's entirely. But you just gotta ask, I guess, figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. Real life does absolutely get in the way of a lot of things, and yeah, but it's always better just to be upfront, I guess.
Yep. Right. I think we did it.
I think we did it, man. I'm really pleased. We will do our best to obviously do these more. Hopefully, I'm going to get some games up on the go as soon as I finally work out how to use Zoom and all that jazz.
Yeah.
But yeah. Good talking, man. Cool. How do we sign off from this?
I think we just say bye.
We say bye until bye.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye.